Well, we're back, and as we promised our listeners, we have as our special guest Rupert Murdoch, together with another Australian, BBC correspondent Michael Carlton, who Mr. Murdoch has specifically asked here to lead this discussion.
Thank you, Julian. Good to see you again, Rupert.
Yes, well, so long as you understand that I'm going to talk about a couple of things I think need to be said, and nothing more. So don't think of this as an interview.
Well, there are already a lot of questions that...
I understand that, but let me say this. A couple of things you certainly ought to know about first. And I'm talking not here just to Mr. Clooney. Hello, Mr. Clooney. But perhaps at least as important, I'd like to talk to his... Sheila, his new lady.
Amal Alamoudin.
She's a representative.
God, the man is deaf.
She's representing our another fellow Australian of ours who's being held in a kind of diplomatic prison there over there in London.
Julian Assange.
And it occurs to me that somebody really ought to do something about that. And just as an act of courtesy to a fellow Australian, maybe you could get some sort of United Nations involved.
No, it's insane. He hates the UN.
Now, perhaps if somebody at the UN, perhaps a news agency, nation, non-governmental, perhaps some organisation of the UN could invite him.
But you hate him.
To the United Nations. In which case, the United Nations would be representing him from the moment he leaves the door of his present residence there in London, and in the company of a blue beret, or possibly even in the waiting car from the United Nations, a blue helmet, he could be then transferred to comfortably and safely and quickly, expeditiously, to the nearest airport, and from there, when he gets to the United States, straight to the United Nations territory. And there he might find himself a little bit more spacious and comfortable. And I'm told the food's very good there. So perhaps he could even get a job there at the United Nations, perhaps with one of the news agencies. He's a very good researcher, apparently. If I were to have an office there, which I don't, we never felt it was really of any great value to us. But now I could, and perhaps it's something we might consider, so long as we don't get bogged down into some tangle of legal animosity because of some other things that have been said and revealed to have been said.
Clooney is challenging you to sue him.
Yes, I know, Michael. That's what I'm talking about. I don't want to go into any of the details of what might or might be done legally, or what the issues might be. But I think a level of restraint might very well be called for. Yeah, I don't know how much you know about Australia, Mr. Clooney, but I might tell you a couple of things that might explain some of the attitudes Australians have, that Australia as a whole might have toward what we might call the ruling class over there in Britain. We have not unrestricted admiration for those people, not least of all because of what happened at Gallipoli. I don't know how much you know about Gallipoli, but I think you really need to understand Gallipoli better. And there's a fine film which I had the honour, privilege, to be involved in supporting and helping come about, called Gallipoli. And I think you ought to hesitate before you do anything in terms of how Australians have been behaving toward the people in Britain. You ought to know a little bit more about how Britain behaved to Australia. You might understand the seeds of resentment. You're interested in politics, aren't you? Aren't you, Mr. Clooney? You should be aware, as I'm sure you are, of the immense power of resentment. It fueled World War II. The way Germans were handled after World War I was despicable. The Treaty of Versailles betrayed them. And so that led to a resentment, and that led to World War II and Hitler and everything else that followed. Now, I mention that because Australians, too, have some basis for resentment. And if our reporting on some of the affairs and activities and attitudes and opinions and beliefs of the people there who run the great British Empire, well, I think that you might understand why we are somewhat sceptical and critical of much of what they've done and what they're doing and what they're continuing to do. And our newspapers made that clear. Ours alone, our press alone, really exercise the kind of authority and the responsibility that the press has to reveal these things, however uncomfortable it might be, however sensational some of those things are and were. And if we continue, will be, here and elsewhere where we have our newspaper enterprise, of which I'm immensely proud. We've made mistakes, we know about that. I don't want to go into that now. That's not the point here. The point is that we need to have a sense of balance and restraint and good judgment that might very well help other things to come about. And with that in mind, I hope, Mr. Clooney, and I hope with the advice of your very wise, if I may speak across your shoulders, so to speak, to your very wise and competent wife, your new lady.
Amal Elamudin.
She seems to know what she's doing. And she seems to have a head on her shoulder. And she, of course, went to Oxford.
As did you, Rupert, with your famous Karl Marx statue.
All right, Michael, that's what I'm going to talk about, Michael. I was at Oxford for a year. It was interesting. I was treated with due contempt, perhaps, because that was reciprocal. I was largely ignored. I was not involved in much social activity, nor was I invited, nor did I particularly wish to be invited. But it was amusing when I got there. There was in the room at Oxford a statue of Karl Marx in the offer, there, in my room, there. It was there when I got there. And I thought it would be, I thought it might be amusing to leave it there, which I did. Because in fact, as I used to say, I'll say to again, to anybody who wants to know about this, that I know far more about the common man than Karl Marx ever did. Common man, if this broadcast is, let me use my frank language here. You can peep it out.
I'm not sure he even understands what he's saying.
Because I used to say, rightly, I know more about the common man than ever Karl Marx knew, because the common man has only two things that interest him: sports and tits. And I provided that. And that gave me the power to very largely shape some of the political directions. I'm happy about that. I think that was a fair exchange. And so with that in mind, I hope that you reconsider what, according to some of those documents that have been released from Sony, according to some of those suggest that you were planning something pretty savage. So I hope that you would reconsider that, in the same way that I hope you would reconsider some of the options that might be available for some of the other Australians over there in England now. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, there's some pretty serious accusations in the book that I didn't think...
No, I don't want more. No, my understanding was that we would not get into that.
But a lot of things we're going to talk about, surely.
No, with respect, I'm going to have to ask you
Rupert, there are people waiting here.
End our program here. I thank you for the opportunity.
Please, Mr. Murdoch, just a couple more questions, if you could.
Rupert, the students have been waiting here for hours.
Thank you.
That's unfair.
No, Michael, it was good to see you again. Thank you.
I don't know if he means this is some kind of a joke or what. This is a complete contradiction of everything he's always said. All the stuff about Assange and the UN makes no sense at all. Helga, you really ought to check it out before he leaves tomorrow morning.
Please, Mr. Murdoch, can we just clarify some things that you said yesterday? Were you serious about your dramatic change of heart on Assange and the UN?
No, nothing's changed. Assange has been charged with the theft of private information and its publication. Now, that's illegal, and should be. And that's the issue. The problem of privacy in the digital age. That's what's got to deal with. It's got to do what's going in England. Right now, it's irrelevant because all that's happening there is that the poor taxpayers in England are forking out £10 million just to keep his door locked. That makes no sense. And in Sweden, they're all overwrought about a completely separate issue. Someone said it's condom etiquette. So whatever, it's got nothing to do with the real issue here, privacy in the digital age. And it's an international problem. The United Nations, probably only people who can even begin to look at it properly, and at least to give them something to do that's useful for a change.
And is there any precedence for the UN to formally invite people facing criminal charges in the U.S.?
They sent an invitation to Kurt Waldheim to come for some anniversary, some event, back when then he'd been the United Nations Secretary General, and he was then classified as a Nazi war criminal in the United States, but still they planned that they could bring him in here and take him out under United Nations auspices. They came to their senses and they stopped the invitation. But the principle's the same. So anyway, talk to the United Nations.
Can I just ask you one more question?
Talk to the United Nations. You're a very good journalist, Wanda. You're a very good journalist.